Hey guys, really excited. About to hop on with my man Kevin to do a live stream. He is a polarity coach. He helps people to sort through their masculine and feminine dynamics within relationships and within themselves. Hi, Dr. Lana. Good to see you. Hope to see you soon, friend. And yeah, I'm going to be diving deep on how the attributes of embodiment kind of overlap with his specialities. So what we're calling this is how to embody your polarity. And it's going to be highly fascinating as we drop into the physical codes behind these archetypical patterns of the masculine and feminine. There's so much we could get into, so much I've been diving deep into. And we're going to set it off as soon as Kevin hops on the live stream here. There he is. My man is in the room. Let's get this fire bringing to the people. Boom, boom, boom. So yeah, any second now, there'll be a request sent my way. And always the hardest part for me is being patient because I want to start dropping these codes immediately. And we'll get right into it as soon as we get Kevin on this top-bottom screen situation here. So, and if you guys have any questions on any of this stuff, any particular areas of focus that you want us to dive into, feel free to ask us as we're going through the stream. I will be I'll be answering any questions you guys have. We got Kevin's request coming through here now, so click and view requests, and we are live with the people. Okay, it looks like I just added your request. There he is, Kevin. Good morning, my brother. Hello, hello, hello.
What's good, brother? Good evening from Ubud. How are you?
Where are you right now?
I'm in Bali, in Ubud.
Bali, beautiful, man, beautiful. Ani is also out there as well at the moment. It looks like such a beautiful place. I've been seeing his journey and just marveling at the jungle that place seems to be.
Yeah, man, it's full on. You haven't been out here before?
Never been to Bali, no, but it will come in the future for sure.
You would love it, yeah.
Man, thanks for hopping on with me. This is a topic I feel like you are incredibly suited to discuss with me, and something that, has been arising in my personal practice and exploring. And mostly I'm just excited to exchange codes with you on, what it means to literally embody these archetypical polarity patterns. And before we just get into it, I just want to say, I see you on all the awesome content you've been posting and really just bringing value to so many people across so many platforms. So thank you for hopping on with me today.
Appreciate it, man. We haven't really dropped in, even though we've been in the Austin crew. So I'm excited to get to know more about your style as well.
And I guess what I tend to hold as a distinguishing factor of my particular medicine and practice is this element of body prioritization, right? This belief that everything that we are kind of stems from our physical self. And, and it's somewhat obvious despite what the world may be trying to program us to think. When you look at a masculine and feminine body, that there is a tendency towards certain characteristics that manifest those energetic patternings in their physical form. So much more. I'm just gonna start unloading on you here, and really excited to hear your perspective on it. But I wonder, before I just start going full steam on the things that have been ruminating in my head, how do you think about the embodiment aspect of what you teach?
I mean, you kind of said it, man. The body is the ultimate technology. It's the ultimate sacred site. So the soma, the body, will tell all. And the polarity, masculine, feminine, it's very evident when you're at the body level. And I'm not talking about even anatomy and genitalia. I'm just talking about the lived experience of where sexuality, desire, emotion, healing, all of it takes place in the body. Thinking takes place in the body. The mind and the body are not separate. Embodied cognition of the nervous system, scientifically even, our mind is distributed through our body. It's not just this little place up here. So no matter if you're looking at it philosophically, you're looking at it metaphysically, it does all come back to somatics. And so I would agree with you. That's the primary site of polarity.
Of course. And what I think gets really fascinating is when you start to consider, all right, the body is the source of all this stuff. Now, say we want to develop certain attributes or characteristics. How do we do that through the body? And I'll give you a really interesting example. I had a client of mine, she was a girl, but she was highly in her masculine and, very career driven, very linear thought processes. And she tasked me with wanting to tap in more to her feminine nature. And this took a little bit of consideration. I was like, all right, how do we train to help you get more in your feminine? And what I came to realize is there is a connection between spinal joint articulation and capacity and the flow of feminine energy. So, like, when someone is like very stiff in their central column, it's like very masculine and rigid. And when they're super like flowy and loose in that central column, it can start to open up more of that feminine flow of energetics. So we literally like started to train her spine, started to train the individuation of each of those joints so that they had more articulation potential, and then started to teach her how to control them in linear holdings and more parallelogram, flowy, curvy sort of ways of moving and control. And it like the effect was almost not instantaneous, but it happened very quickly over the course of a few weeks, where she started to be able to tap more into that feminine nature just by simply embodying that physical attribute. So that's like kind of a starting point that I found really interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you nailed it. And this is well described in the work of Wilhelm Reich and Alexander Lowen, who I'm sure you're familiar with in bioenergetics and that whole theory set. It's all about musculature, posture, and fluid dynamics, right, in the fascia and the body. I think that's real. And, when you see a woman who is very masculine, right, or you see a man that is very feminine, you can see it in how they walk and how they move and how they dance. I can see it by the tone of their voice and how they speak. That's more of where I go. It's more of the psycho linguistics is where I like. That's my field. But the posture stuff is huge, and I know from training with Elliot Hulse and going deep into bioenergetics that it's all there in their character structure, right? So I think, yeah, there's a lot of, and that's not really been well studied. I don't know of a lot of work that goes into polarity in terms of like the posture.
Well, I do, and I'm excited to share it with you. But to keep this kind of like a two-sided exchange, because I could just like unload all this stuff that's been ruminating in my head. Tell me more about the language aspect you're talking about. How does that show up?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's tone. So I'm sure we've all, been with someone with tonality. Like the masculine tonality is direct, it's decisive. It creates discrimination and distinction. It's logos. You can feel it in the voice. You can feel it in the style of speech. Feminine tonality is eros. It's much more feeling, sensation, emotional tone. It can be more. There's more life force in it, and like we've all heard the voice of a woman where it's like it'll just melt you because its ability to open the field and like change it in the moment of like filling it with energy. That's that feminine tone. And so to me, it's like that. It's not always the whole story. There might be someone who has the voice part down, but maybe they are energetically or like behaviorally more disposed to the other polarity. So it's not necessarily a rule of thumb, but it's just something interesting I've trained myself to notice a lot.
So what comes up for me when you're saying that is like there is this pitch element, right? Where like the feminine voice tends to be a little bit more higher up here, and the masculine archetypically is a little bit more low and deep. And then bringing that into the embodied aspect, and I don't know how true this is, but this is the direction my mind is going. I know that deeper tones resonate with lower aspects of the body, right? And higher tones tend to resonate more with like our upper portion. For example, if we vibrate with the oh really deep, we're going to feel it down in our root. And if we vibrate with the he, we're going to feel it more up in our crown. And it tends to be typically that this feminine linguistic pattern is more in that higher upper echelon of frequency vibration. And I've never really considered this before, but do you think there is a connection between the masculine and the lower root and the feminine in the upper, like more ethereal spaces? Because I never really considered that directionality of like the uprising from our bottom to the top to have a relationship to the masculine and feminine until you just said that right now.
I think there is a relationship. There's definitely some kind of correlation there. It is a both and thing, right? Because you could flip it the other way, right? The masculine logos, the mental faculty of strategy, leadership, containment is more of that higher. Whereas the feminine of eros, nurture, intuition, the womb, wisdom is the lower, right? And even think about heaven and earth, right? The yang principle in Taoism, right, is heaven, masculine, yin is the earth, feminine. So there's a both and there that you can play with. I think in the tonality, the pitch, like you're saying, there is something there. It is interesting to think about.
And that's another interesting lens to kind of explore the okay, so we have this kind of mapping where like the higher pitch is higher up physically on our body. And we also kind of relate the more emergent elements of our embodiment, our psychosomatic state, our thinking mind with like a higher up thing. Whereas like our more grounded physical somatic elements seem to be kind of lower on that chain of emergence. And it does seem like the logical capacity is more on that higher up scale, less away from the felt sense than the emotional, feminine, receptive capacity. So this attribute of directionality and then like polarity kind of is like forming an interesting graph matrix in my mind where we have like this up and down, but also it's a left and right, kind of the masculine and feminine. And they are interestingly intertwined. And I think most of us, are pretty aware at this point that the left side of our body is associated with the feminine, right? And the right side of our body is associated with the masculine. That's pretty common. I think what's interesting to know is that it's not necessarily a left or right thing, because it actually is our right side of our brain that controls our left arm and our left side of our brain that controls our right arm. So it's not inherently left or right. That's just like how it manifests inside of us with this crisscrossing pattern. Yeah, so much more I could say on that. How do you, let's say you want to tap into your more feminine side, how do you do that physically?
Yeah, physically, this is how I would do it, like how I did it today or days where I want to like surrender. That's my like feminine power word, or like that's how I access it. It's like I want to receive, I want to surrender. So I probably want to open my posture up. I might want to do a practice where I can go into receiving energy. So that might be dancing, that might be a more feminine style of meditation where I'm not really trying to achieve anything. I'm just being receptive. I'm just sensing. I get a lot of body work done. I mean, here in Bali, it's incredible. So that's very feminine to me. It's like, all right, I'm going to like literally love my body, love my soma, and receive nurture. So that's a way I can receive as well. And final movement you were talking about earlier is definitely valuable. So a more feminine style of dance would be like ecstatic dance or like very improvisational dance. And that's one way that I could access feminine energy.
So a few more codes on accessing the feminine, and then it's kind of like the opposite kind of works for the masculine, right? If you want to enter your masculine, it kind of works to tension and rigidify and linearize your patterns of movement, whereas the feminine is kind of like more multidimensional, more flow-based, more improvisational, less structured, right? So like that can be literally integrated into the aspects of your movement practice depending on which attribute you want to check in. Also, do you ever play around with mudras? Are you a big mudra guy at all?
I love mudras.
Yeah, so one thing that came to me on a recent just download during a ketamine trip is I was playing with different mudras, and I recognized that we have a tendency to bring one hand dominant on top, right? So it's like I tend to always cross this direction. And by simply like switching the hand that was on top, I felt like, oh wow, I'm now tapping into that left side feminine energy a little bit more because it's my less dominant side. So I've been playing around with mudras, but switching the dominance of the hand to the side that I'm not patterned to, which seems to create a very novel stimulation. And since it is switching my left on top, seems to tap more into that feminine energy when I'm calling that forward. So that's a fun little thing.
I know exactly what you mean. I do the same thing. I love mudras.
Yeah. Another one is this relationship of our pelvis to our hips, right? This is a center of a lot of like sexual energy and openness. And I found that just by like tilting your pelvis back and kind of opening the space between your rib cage and your hip, you can tap more into almost like the feminine side of sexuality because this tucking of our hips kind of constricts that pelvis zone and kind of you see it as like people who are a tight ass. They say don't be a tight ass, right? It's like when you really underneath you're really firm in your rigidness, and when you tilt that up you kind of like open this up. And I'm sure you've experienced girls who are just like so open in that regard, and they're just so tapped into their feminine potential. And it can go too far where it starts to create compression on the backside, and that can manifest a lot of stuff that is not being faced, like unconscious layers that are not being recognized because it's so open to the present in the moment. That's another aspect of, I would say, like that. You could call it feminine. I tend to notice it more in the feminine, but really it's like opening up that sexual side. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah. No, I mean, the body level stuff is, for me, like dancing always comes up. Like dancing and martial arts are the two places I see movement and the embodiment of these poles, like we're talking about. It's just so obvious, right? And that's why I think a lot of people, in the conscious community, they love to dance with someone as kind of a courtship ritual, or like, it's ancient, right? It's not just the conscious community. Everybody likes to dance, and it's an amazing place to explore someone else's polarity or explore their dominant archetype because it's going to come through their embodiment, almost more than their language.
I've been playing with a lot of contact flow with my lady, which is one of my most recent forms of flow. I flow with objects quite a bit, whether it's a mace or something else. Like I like to, or just my body. But actually having a partner that can now become like an object of flow, and it's not an object because it's a relationship, but it is like uh, it is an object that you're interacting with. Um, has been a really fascinating practice for us to explore, playing with different contact points and feeling our energy and our sway. And how it shows up in our dancing is, there's so much I can say. Well, for one, it becomes like almost my job to create a container for her, right? The
Right.
masculine is like a containing. And how that shows up physically is like my arms get a little bit wider and around her and kind of embrace and hold her energy in while her energy is kind of swirling within that, extending out and pulling back. Um, yeah, this is another really interesting concept I would love to drop on you as a polarity guy. I'm fascinated with what I'm calling portal dynamics, and this shows up on the dance floor. Like this is a phenomenon that seems to occur when you get a lot of witchy guys and girls together in a space and start to like go really deep, and it physically manifests as like a circle of masculine energy, like a more structured containing. And whether that's guys or girls, it's like normally it's guys kind of on the outside. And then it usually starts with like one girl kind of like opening up that flow. And then maybe she draws one other girl in. And then when there's two feminines kind of interacting, it starts to create this like energy that it swirls and spirals and invites outward and draws in while being kind of contained by this outer layer. And, it's moving, it's vibrating, it's pulsating. And when you're in crowds, it's like very real. Holding space becomes not just
Oh
a
yeah.
like concept. It's like we actually have to hold this space, because if we don't, then there's not room for this feminine to flow. So I've been calling that portal dynamics, and I just find it very fascinating.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, and on the dance floor, it will just spontaneously happen, right? And like Shakti begets Shakti. So like once one woman starts dancing really powerfully, she becomes a permissionary for all the other Shaktis to just jump in. And then when it really gets going, when the portal's open, that's when it just jumps off. And I think that's what makes a good party or dance floor, is when that dynamic forms.
Here's some more elements that seem to arise from it, right? There is um, like as the beat is building, it like consolidates. People start getting close and they start getting low. They start getting in, they start getting small. And this is kind of the physical manifestation of that energy. And then as the beat drops, it kind of opens and expands and spreads out. And it's kind of this undulating, pulsing, when done right, energetic exchange that really encapsulates an embodiment of the masculine and feminine in a very interesting way.
Right. I mean, it's in everything. That's what's amazing. I mean, it's natural law. It's like the law of polarity, the law of gender. You can look at hermetics, or pick your like tradition, but it's literally there if you have eyes to see it, right? Like the dance floor, like the relationship of the DJ to the dance floor is a huge one of masculine and feminine. The relationship, obviously, of the masculine and feminine inter like dynamics on the dance floor. I mean, I'm sure you've been to many festivals and seen that play out. I mean, it's amazing. It's beautiful to watch. It's like watching a flock of birds, or like watching a school of fish, if you can see it that way.
The most powerful magic I've ever witnessed. It's and I believe it can be even more powerful when it's a little bit more consciously understood, and it's like, oh, this is what's happening, okay, let's make it happen, right? Because right now I see it so just intuitively manifest, which is why I'm trying to put like a structuring of language around it to help people like see this phenomenon out in the world, and then like create it, because I think that's real. That's when the magic happens on the dance floor, man. And
Totally.
I fully believe that there is ways in which we can train our body to maximize different elements of this polarity. And whether it's a girl that like is just like completely without structure, right? She's just like so lost in the feminine that she's having a hard time like getting her life in order. I think by literally training her structure to like hold a steady posture, especially under when like she's stressed under nervous system load. So this is a big thing for me. Like I will get people to the point where they're exhausted and they want to collapse, and then have them hold a posture, right? And I think that can really literally strengthen that masculine support system energetically from a place of our nervous system. Or maybe it's, the opposite direction as well. And I think what's so powerful about polarity as a map is its simplification. It really it takes the world and it makes it super simple. You see everything in its complexity, but just through these two interacting elements.
Right. I mean, we live in a duality dimension, like night and day, sun and moon, masculine and feminine, man and woman, life, death. There's all these binaries that rule the dimension we're in. And like non-binary, non-duality is awesome. Like obviously that's also a channel you can tune into, but reality is not non-binary.
Yeah.
There's not just like one type of energy. Like night and day is the most obvious one. We literally have a cycle that nature is just constantly showing us. That's just happening. And so you get to dance within it. So once you just accept that and start to study and master, call it duality, call it polarity, call it whatever you want, call it yin and yang, call it the dance, the art, the great work. There's all these names, but it's like playing with the opposites, playing with the poles, finding your position and footing, and then like you said, making it conscious so you can recognize the patterns. This applies to sex, this applies to money, this applies to the body, this applies to healing, it applies to, you know, your life cycle. Like you're going to go through, you know, like in spiral dynamics, you're spiraling between two poles and then hopefully moving in a direction of growth, right? Or like, yeah, there's also the downward spiral, of course, too, if you're decomposing. But yeah, I mean, this is, I think a lot of people get caught up in the masculine, feminine stuff and like that trips them up. But you're right, it's so powerful as a viewpoint.
Yeah, the people don't fully grasp the nature of how intrinsically polarity is tied into every aspect of the way we perceive. And I think one of the most important keys in starting to navigate this is to recognize that polarity is directional, it's not oppositional, right? So it's like hot and cold are not opposites of each other, they're just different directions on the spectrum. Here and there is different directions. And we see everything through this, whether it's good and bad, or whether it's trying to think of some good examples. Let's say, it's really inherent into the way that we view everything, because anything that you see is only known relative to its opposite pole. So if I say this is good, it's only good because there is a bad on the other side. If I say that that's sexy, the only reason I know that's sexy is because there's another pole that it can be relatively compared to. And without that relativity that the polarity within our brain allows, we don't have any sort of like scale of judgment for anything, and there's no discernment whatsoever. So it's like metaphysically tied into every aspect of actuality. So it's really interesting to think about it beyond just the masculine and feminine and just polarity in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice idea to go non-dual and go into like a transcendent dimension where polarity collapses, which definitely is real, right? You can get there through many altered states, but that's not your day to day. That's not the lived reality. Like, good luck with maintaining that. It's not going to happen.
There's nowhere to
Right.
go.
Right.
Nowhere to go when all is one, right? And Ram Dass has a great quote that I think really sums this up, where he says, "The one becomes the two so that it may go away from itself and look back at itself to know itself," right? And this is an aspect of, diving deep into this study that I've been doing for this book that is driving me a little bit cuckoo, as can happen anytime you're going really, really deep into something, is this recognition that embodiment in one sense is a unification process. It's like, if you cut off your finger, it's no longer part of your body. It needs to be unified into this whole. If you spit, it's no longer part of your body. If your cells try to individuate, right, they're no longer in a collected self. And the boundary of that unification is our self-awareness, which in itself is kind of like a division. So it's like this line of like, I'm here and that's out there. When in actuality, everything is like a giant unification, but our mind sees it in terms of cause and effect to better understand and have more use and actionability in it. So the fascinating aspect of that to me is the only way we can really know ourselves is by almost tricking ourselves into lying to ourselves. And what I mean by that is like a very simple example. I can't intuitively always feel everything that's within me. I am like very limited in my sense of ability to sense. Like someone might need to look at me from behind and be like, "Hey man, you're slouching." And then all of a sudden this external reference point helped me to know myself a little better. So this division between me and something that really is me separating now helped me to know myself better. And you see how I'm kind of going a little bit cuckoo with it. It kind of
Yeah. I mean, life happens in relationship. Like you can't see your own eyes, right? Or bite your own teeth. It's like there's a self-referencing that is limited. Even though the paradox is, yeah, like you said, like everything is connected, even on a quantum, like mechanical, physical level, all matter is energy that's just connected. And science doesn't really understand how. One theory is that all protons are micro black holes to all other protons, like wormholes. There's crazy shit in quantum mechanics and the mathematics. But if you've had an altered state experience through breath work or through plants or whatever, you can directly experience that. Or in deep lovemaking, you can experience that. Life happens in relationships. So I think relationship is the ultimate growth path. Obviously, romantic relationship is super powerful, but the family relationship, brotherhood, sisterhood relationship, these are all pathways of growth and self-knowledge. And it's impossible to get through life without them. You can go into a cave and be a monk or go in the jungle and disappear, but very few humans have chosen that path. It is a path, but it's not one that I think most of us are on.
Which is why, it's the niche that you're in, I find so fascinating, because polarity is everything we perceive, but it shows up more interestingly in our relationships with others, and in that masculine and feminine dynamic. I wonder how often, because I imagine a lot of what you're doing is like helping people in relationships kind of come into an equilibrium within these energies. How often do you recommend somebody who's maybe trying to hold that masculine space more to be still and be tall through their crown and not fidget, and that element of being in their masculine, how it shows up in their physical and the way they're relating? Is that something you touch on?
100%. I mean, I resonate a lot with a stoic philosophy and bearing, whatever you want to call that. Use the classic Greek stoicism, but it's really beyond that. It's the masculine ability, like you said, to be tall in posture, but energetically just be super solid and not fidget or come off center too quickly, and just hold, hold the energy, observe. When you're in a straight spine and mentally you're in a straight alignment, which means you're focusing. The energy is coming inward and it's directed. I mean, it's extremely powerful. And what you also find in the romantic situation is that women crave that because they can feel the masculine edge and they feel his presence and his single focus. It's extremely powerful. It's phallic. It's literally phallic energy.
And that's so fascinating how it shows up in that way within our sexual organs. It's amazing that anybody can deny it so blatantly in front of them. And you do a great job of this, man. Just even in this conversation, I feel your centeredness, and I also recognize my excited, jubilant energy going in all directions, kind of mirrored back in your stoic centeredness. And it's something that when I'm relating and when I'm embody in relationship, I'm more aware of. But I definitely have some room for embodying there and learning how to take this energy and find that center point to it is a deepening practice for myself. So I appreciate you as a mirror, man. It's cool to see.
Likewise, brother. I mean, if you spot it, you got it. I know exactly that jubilant energy I also have, just like you also have the it's a mixed bag, right? It's just how it plays out in a dynamic.
Yeah, man. Okay, codes. Let's try to do some rapid fire codes for people before we log on. And just thank you so much for taking the time. I love how open you've been with your time and sharing with people. Wow, you're so still. I thought you were frozen there for a second. Appreciate it, Kevin. Rapid fire codes for people. Okay, we're going to go from the ground up, right? So first things first. If you're light on your heels, you're a little bit more bouncy. You're a little bit more in that higher energy state. You're a little bit more in that feminine, open, jubilant energy. If you're heavy on your heels, you're grounded on the ground. That's more of a sturdy, stabilizing, let's say masculine sort of way. So this distinction between where your feet place on the ground can sort of play into this energetically. If your knees are locked out, you are going to be very stiff and rigid and somewhat avoidant with your energy, and you're going to be ungrounded in a sense, right? So this is a phenomenon I've noticed. A lot of girls stand with their knees locked out. And for the longest time, I was trying to figure out, why is it that girls stand with their knees locked out? And my current theory is that it's a pattern of awareness avoidance. It's a way to send your awareness outside of yourself when you don't feel safe, right? Because it like disconnects you from yourself, and it's a protective mechanism. So by getting a little grounding of your knees, a little bend of your knees, you can come back into yourself a little deeper. The relationship of your pelvis and your hips. When your hips are tilted forward and that spine is open, it's going to open up the sexual energy. Let's call it the more feminine side, because it's more receptive, right? You're exposing your vital organs to the world. And when the hips are tucked under, that's going to tap into more of that like hard ass, masculine, rigid sort of persona, because it actually stiffens up the curvature of the spine. Right? Directly connects to that. And here's another phenomenon I've noticed is witchy channel girls, they tend to do like this shit with their hands. They're like, so there's something to do with like channeling through the feminine, with the way that we manipulate our mudras. So our fingers are the way that we interact with the world. If you are gripping onto things very strong, you may be holding on to like a masculine force element. Whereas if you can allow a little bit of flow and manipulation to the fingers of the way that you interact with the world, that may tap you more into the feminine. So those are some quick rapid fire codes on embodying polarity. Yeah, man.
I love it.
Anything
I
else?
mean, the like extremes I'm seeing are, the feminine is like, think of like belly dancing or very spinal flow, hip flow movements, like in terms of like a dance. You want to go full masculine, you do the haka, right? It's
Yeah.
very like, it stomps, it strikes, it's expressive, and it's like boom, it has impact. So those are like the extremes I'm seeing in terms of like the embodiment. They both have like huge aspects of masculine and feminine.
Yeah. And I think what's going to be an interesting thing, that I would invite you to explore with working with your clients is how you can take these physical awarenesses and maybe use them as a way to help people overcome what they might be facing in relationships. So like maybe you have a partner, and maybe this is something you're already doing, but it's just an idea that's coming to mind. Like sit with your partner and like, all right, you're going to hold stillness. She's going to let herself flow and move. And that might be like a really rapid fire way to bypass the thinking about it and the feeling about it and get right into the physical somatic sense of it. And I truly believe we're only scratching the surface of this stuff. Um, but yeah, thank you for hopping on and exploring this with me, man.
Yeah, appreciate you, bro. I mean, that those kind of practices in tantra or bioenergetics are incredible. It's like nonverbal spaces where you literally enact the polarity or the archetypes, and that's something I personally love to do with my partner, but also like with clients. Like this is the creme de la creme. That's the ultimate embodiment practice. The words come later. The words are great. We can word about stuff all we want, but
So one more question before we go. How often, or I'm just curious in like the way that you're coaching and relating people, do you have the female practice holding a masculine energy while the man practices holding like a feminine energy? Is that something that's like even explored often? Because it might seem kind of counterintuitive to what works well in relationship dynamics, but it's like we're taking what we're expecting and kind of flipping it on its head. And I just wonder what would be the effects of that? Like what? Yeah, curious about that.
I mean, it's definitely it's more uncommon and it's more advanced because your contra polarity or your counter polarity, whatever you want to call it, anima, animus is what Jung called them. Like you have the opposite internal energetic. So if you're very masculine dominant, the unconscious will have like a feminine aspect and vice versa. And this is well studied, and there's a lot of different ways to relate to it. But for a couple that's been together for a while, like most people don't need this because they just need to embody more of their dominant polarity, right? They don't need to like fuck around with their counter polarity. They need to own their dominant one. So
Totally.
most
That's
people, I wouldn't recommend this. But if you're in a long-term partnership or you are on a solo journey and you're quite advanced and you know that you're masculine or feminine and you embody that, most of the time, maybe 80-20 rule is what I recommend. then the counter polarity can be super fruitful. In a relationship, it's extremely fruitful because what it'll do is it'll create a pattern where vulnerability and intimacy are just, it's so available because you're actually just able to see each other in that other energy and experience it. Now, you probably won't want to hang out there, but in terms of a ritual and experience, a deep, intimate encounter, very powerful.
Yeah, I could see that being such a pattern breaker, such a like novelty, such a flip of polarity that it could be very interesting to explore. I think I will kind of dive into that with my partner a little bit because and I also hear what you're saying about it's like, you know, that's the 80-20 rule. It's probably not going to work as uh, a long-term practice, but as a deep ritual, I think that could be very fascinating to explore. Um,
Yeah,
Thank you.
100%.
Enjoy your magical Bali Wonderland, and yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate the magic you're bringing to the world.
Thank you, brother. Likewise, I'll see you back in Austin, hopefully in a month or two.
Let's open some portals, man. Let's open some portals. Bye,
Right
brother.
on. Good night.